Hey everyone, welcome to the Investor.Bet NRL round 27 betting preview video, final round of the season. I'm super excited to run through all the matches coming up this weekend, go through the betting trends, who's been covering, what the odds were in their last meetings, and what the total points have been. Have their games been going over or under the total, and go through what I'm considering betting in these games and the reasons why that's the case. And you've been following along throughout the season, you know we do that through using statistics and data of these teams' performances and look for value in the markets. So final round of the season, we pretty much, if we look at the ladder, the top four is pretty much locked in. It'd be very unlikely to see much change here. Storm have already locked in top spot. Panthers likely secure the second spot. Roosters, who were hit with a couple of injuries last week, and Sharks will fight out third and fourth. And obviously, Sharks could potentially drop down to fifth. However, that would require the Sharks losing their game to Manly by around the 30 to 40 points, and the Bulldogs beating the Cowboys by a similar margin to reverse that for and against, which does seem very unlikely with the outs for the Bulldogs this week and then playing the Cowboys. Outside of that, 5th to 8th is definitely interesting and some changes could happen here. Manly can obviously move up if they beat the Sharks. Cowboys, Bulldogs go head to head, and the winner of that game will secure a home elimination final. And then we have the battle for 8th spot between the Dolphins and Knights, which is the final game of the round. The winner of that matchup locks in a spot in the finals. So that's a really, really great game to end the season on. The only way one of those two sides don't lock in a spot in the top 8 is if this matchup here between the Dolphins and Knights ends in a draw, and either the Dragons win their game or the Raiders win their game. One of those two sides would take that 8th position. Before we get into this weekend's games, I want to quickly recap what happened last week. So it was a round of really high-scoring matches, but only 4 games went over the total points line, so therefore 4 went under. But pretty much majority of matches all totaled 50-plus points. We had 68 in the opening game between the Cowboys Storm, 56 in the Bulldogs Seagulls games, slightly lower scoring at 46 in the Panthers Rabbitohs, 34 of them coming through Penrith. Extremely high scoring, 84 points between the Eels and Dragons. I haven't checked it, but that'd be nearly, if not is, the highest scoring game of the season. Dragons trying to make a big comeback there. Dolphins are big winners over the Broncos, 46 points, 58 in the Sharks Warriors game. Knights, Titans equaled the 50, and then a low-scoring game to end the round between the Roosters and Raiders. Home teams won 5 of the 8 games. Underdogs had a really, really good week. They covered 6 of the 8. The only 2 favorites to cover the spread were the Panthers against the Rabbitohs, who are big, big favorites, and then the Knights, who were close to double-digit favorites against the Gold Coast Titans. All the other games, the underdog covered the spread. The Underdogs also won 5 matchups over last weekend. The Storm were the only underdog. If you minus the numbers, the Storm were the only underdog who covered the spread, but didn't win the game, losing by 8 up in Townsville against the Cowboys. So now, if we move forward to this weekend, there's a few kind of tricky games that are going to just be sort of interesting. A few games where we're going to use them to look ahead as to how these teams will perform in finals, and just an overall interesting round. So let's get into it. Opening game between the Broncos and the Melbourne Storm at Suncorp Stadium on Thursday night. Storm were minus 8.5 on Monday, and then since lineups have come out, that's pushed right out to minus 14.5 as it currently stands, total at 51.5 points. So Storm big favorites to win this game. Pretty much all their players that they rested last week against the Cowboys come back into the lineup. They do lose Ryan Papenhuyzen, so he's going to be out with injury, but looking at these lineups, the Melbourne Storm should win this game and win it comfortably. They obviously pushed the Cowboys for an 8-point margin last week, down a lot of players, still managed 30 points in this game. I don't think they're going to have any issue beating the Broncos, who were playing for their season last week to secure a spot in the top 8, but only managed 6 points and conceded 40 against Redcliffe. it's hard to see like the Broncos coming out here and really showing much of that. I think the Storm may just run right through them. Melbourne have a very, very good record against them, winning 15 of the past 16. They've covered 12 of the past 15, even though the Broncos have covered the past two. They met in Melbourne earlier this season in round 5, with the Storm winning 34 points to 32. I think the margin this time around is going to be a lot greater. The Storm, this is like a real game where they can generate a lot of confidence going into finals against a team that looks to be lacking a lot of confidence. And after halftime last week against the Dolphins, really didn't show a lot. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Melbourne run up a score here. I like them to be winning this game, winning it comfortably. Lean on it being a higher scoring game. Earlier this season, the total was 39.5. It's up to 51.5 for this game. Broncos games this season have majority of the time been high scoring, and Storm are capable and one of the highest scoring teams in the competition if we bring up the bet finders for this game. Storm average just under 28 points a game, the second highest scoring team in first halves. Leaning on this being a higher scoring game, so looking at the total points going over, and then Storm to be winning. First game on Friday night is the battle for the wooden spoon. So the loser of this game will finish last on the ladder this season. If we bring up the ladder again, there's Eels, Tigers, both on 18 competition points. So whoever gets the points for this game, if it ends in a draw, then Tigers will stay last. Currently, the odds for this game, Parramatta are small favorites, $1.64 on the money line, minus 3.5 points, and the total is 49.5. From a historical perspective, the Tigers have covered the past 4 versus Parramatta, and the line has pretty much been getting closer with each meeting. So back in round 6, 2022, they are 21.5 point underdogs, then down to 14.5, 12.5, 7.5 in the round 4 meeting this season where they won that game outright, and then down to plus 3.5 for the game this weekend. So the gap between these two teams has been closing. Parramatta have won 9 of the past 11 versus the Tigers. The 2 wins the Tigers had were both by 1 point. So this win here by 1, and then back in 2022 by 1 point, 21-20, as $10.50 underdogs for that matchup. It's a bit of a weird situation here for the Tigers. They had the bye last week. They come back to play this game, and then it's the end of the season. So how they turn up is obviously, a bit of a tricky situation to predict, but I think with the fact that they can get themselves off the bottom of the ladder, they have a sold-out stadium I saw yesterday for this game, so they'll have their support to give themselves the best chance of winning. I think they will turn up. They've put together back-to-back wins heading into their bye, beating Manly and South Sydney. Obviously, they are helped with the sin bins against the Seagulls to win that game, but still won the game by 8 points and scored 34 in that game, which, as the lowest scoring side in the competition, they only average exactly 19 points a game. That was a good performance heading into their bye. They come into this fresh. The Eels as well come into this in, obviously not great form, but better than what you could say majority of their season has been. They put up 44 points against the Dragons last week, winning that game 44-40. And then the week prior, they did have a 16-point lead against Brisbane before the Broncos came back to win that game by 6 points. My thoughts on this game, I do kind of get the feeling it's going to be a close game and going to come down to the wire. So at the spread, I'd be leaning towards the Tigers. I'd prefer a plus 4.5 than a plus 3.5. There's really no difference in plus 3.5 to plus 2.5. So look for the better number, if you're considering that as a bet. But on a head-to-head, I feel like the Eels may be able to grab this one, but I don't think there's going to be a great deal between them. I'll be looking at like the either side to win by 1-10, 1-12. And I'm also expecting this to be a high scoring game. Total at 49.5, 10 of the past 12 between these two sides have gone over. Eels are coming off an 84-point game last week, a 54-point game the week prior, 52 the week prior to that, then a 70-point game the week prior, and a 50-point game the week prior to that, around 22 against New Zealand. So their past 5 have all been 50-plus point games. And then the West Tigers are coming off a 60-point game prior to the bye against Manly. Then prior to that, they were in a low-scoring game against the Rabbitohs, but that's kind of been the Rabbitohs trend of recent times. And The Tigers just did enough to win that game. And then if you go back through, then I won't bother reading them all out, but majority there, 6 to 7 plus weeks prior to that were all real high scoring games. These are the two worst defensive sides in the competition. They both concede 30 points on average. And, as we saw last week with the Eels, the Dragons just were running in tries late in that game, left, right, and center. So they can concede points very, very quickly. So I'd definitely be looking at that over 49.5 points. Rabbitohs versus Roosters. The Roosters minus 10.5. They're $1.28 to win this game. Total at 53.5. 4 of the past 5 between these two sides have gone under. So historically, these have been low-scoring games. The matchup earlier this season kind of went against that trend with the Roosters putting up 48 points to the Rabbitohs 6 as only 3.5-point favorites. So there's a much bigger spread for them for this game. The Rabbitohs have lost 6 straight games coming into this last week, losing to Penrith. And the Roosters dropped their first game in a month by 2 points last week against Canberra. Now, the key for this game, Roosters obviously going to be without Sam Walker and Brandon Smith, who are really key players in their spine. And, with those injuries, it's going to be really difficult to see them going on to win the premiership. So that really opens it up now for the Storm, Panthers, and Sharks as the real genuine chances this season. And as we've spoken about in previous videos, how important it is to finish in the top 4 to win the premiership in the NRL. There are a few teams outside of that top 4, mainly the Bulldogs from a defensive perspective, who could give themselves a chance, as defense is one of the key factors for winning the premiership. But I'm just not sure the Bulldogs have enough points in them as well, regardless of how strong they are defensively, to beat a Storm or Penrith side. For this game, is probably going to be one I'm not going to bet into, even though the Roosters have won and covered the past 3 versus South Sydney. And South Sydney were my team that I was fading this season. I'm not going to, keep driving that point home. My gut feeling of this matchup is it's going to be the opportunity for the Roosters to try some things heading into finals. They're obviously going to need to make pretty massive adjustments to their style to overcome those 2 key injuries that they have. And this is the week where they're going to test to do that. So I don't really want to be involved with them as big favorites, as much as I think they're going to win this game. And they're probably be hard, Rabbitohs just aren't a good enough side to beat them unless the Roosters just don't turn up at all. And the other kind of awkward thing for the Roosters is that, it doesn't really matter whether they win or lose this game. They're going to be in the top 4 regardless. They could decide, well, we want to win this game and play Penrith next week, or, we're happy to lose and play the Storm in week 1. I don't know what the thinking is, with the team from that perspective. But one thing I do know is they're going to be trying different strategies to get things working and rolling going into finals. And, with a game that it doesn't matter whether they win or lose, this is the perfect opportunity to do that. I'd be leaning towards the under 53.5 if I had to, decide, what are you going to bet on in this game, just because I don't like the Rabbitohs attack at all. They haven't scored, over 16 points since round 20, which was against the West Tigers. So that is now 6 straight games where they've failed to do that. And they have played, a couple of easy opposition during that time. And, Roosters, even though they do concede points, quite a high rate for a side that's in the top 4, against such a bad attacking side, they should be able to shut them down fairly comfortably. And they have done that recently. Probably if I had to pick a bet, because potentially the Roosters attack just, keeps on firing, I'd rather the Rabbitohs team total under. When I had a quick look, it was set at 20.5. I'd lean towards the under as a potential play in this game, but it's not one, I'm going to be really heavily betting into for the reasons that I mentioned. First game on Saturday afternoon, the Dragons take on the Raiders. St. George, 3.5-point favorites, $1.62 on the money line. 50.5 is the total for this game. The Dragons have covered the past 6 versus Canberra, even though Canberra have won the past 3. So interesting trends going into this. That means, when you look at that, the Raiders have just been favorites for majority of those games. And you can see the Dragons, all these games they've covered have been as an underdog. Their last win against Canberra was round 16, 2022. They're at home here, coming off Kind of an embarrassing loss. The Dragons coach, Shane Flanagan, was really unimpressed. If you saw the post-game press conference and some of the footage around the Dragons last week, particularly with their first half, how they came out and was getting hammered by the Eels throughout that first half. And the game was, I guess most teams over at that point. Just the fact that it was against the Eels, the Dragons were able to, work their way back and make it close towards the end. So that's now back-to-back losses. The winner of this game will be inside the top 8, but then the winner of the Dolphins-Newcastle game will then go overtake them. So kind of the winner of this game is relying on that game being a draw to make finals, but it's unlikely like either of these two sides are going to do a great deal of damage, even though Canberra have beaten the Roosters and Panthers over the past 2 weeks. So they're giving themselves their best shot at making it with 2 big wins there. They lose Elliott Whitehead through suspension, but they do get Jamal Fogarty and Ethan Strange back into their lineup this week. So those are 2 very big ends, their halfback and 5'8", which does give them a shot of winning. The home team has a really good record in this matchup, winning 10 of the past 13, so that sets up well for the Dragons. How I'm looking at playing this game, I'm also looking at the Dragons on a first half. I think after last week, the emphasis for St. George is going to be how they come out in the first half. And when I was going through the stats, I noticed that the Raiders are the second worst attacking first half side, and they're also ranked 12th defensively in the first half. So the Dragons potentially could really get the jump here on Canberra, and then Canberra look to come back at them late. So that's like, from a betting perspective, how I'm most likely looking at playing this game. From a full game perspective, I think the slight value is with Canberra. I think $1.60 for the Dragons is a touch too short. Have them more at the $1.75 to $1.85 range. So this game, more so the Dragons being a 0.5 point, 1 point favorite, as opposed to close to a try favorite. And at the total at 50.5, 8 of the past 12 head-to-head have gone under. I think I'd be leaning towards this game being under. My number is closer to the 45 for these two sides. However, the Dragons are a side who've been leaking points over recent times. Giving up 44 last week against the Eels and 38 against the Sharks the week prior. Looking at those numbers, like, they definitely need to pick up defensively. So for this game, Dragons first half, potentially Raiders for the full game with a little bit of value there, but prefer the first half. Then we have the Bulldogs versus Cowboys. The Bulldogs, $1.70, minus 2.5 point favorites here. Winner of this game secures a home elimination final. The loser, it will depend whether the Seagulls beat the Sharks in the game on Sunday. This is a really, really interesting game. Kind of 2 differentiating game styles going up against each other. The Bulldogs are a real defensive-minded side. The Cowboys are a real attack-minded side. And, their opposite side of that equation isn't that great, kind of mid-pack or slightly worse. So kind of have to decide which way you want to go. The only issue I have with the Bulldogs, Matt Burton being out, I think is a big out for them and does affect their attacking ability quite considerably with his kicking game. And so I would be leaning towards the Cowboys as an underdog here. Not sure if I want to play it at this stage. They do have a really good record versus the Bulldogs in terms of covering the spread. They've covered 6 off the past 7. The past 4 meetings have been split. 3 of those decided by 2 points or less. So they're meeting in round 20 this season. The Cowboys won by 2 points. Then the Bulldogs won by 1 point last season. Then back round 1, 2022, the Bulldogs won in a very low scoring game, 6 points to 4. Overall, 7 of the past 9 between these sides have gone under, including the past 4 games, with the total at 47. Originally, when I was looking at this game, I was leaning towards it going over that number. If Burton was playing, then I'd definitely be going with the over. And I'm still, not completely against it. The Bulldogs games have definitely started taking on a trajectory of being higher scoring. Against Manly last week, they conceded 34 points. They put up 34 the week prior against New Zealand, 30 against the Dolphins, 28 against the Dragons. So, their recent games have been higher scoring, and the Cowboys games this year, one after the other, is just consistently very, very high scoring. Think how I like to play this game. I like the Cowboys as underdogs. and slight lean towards the over, but not super confident on that side. Final game on Saturday night, the Panthers, big favorites here, -16.5, $1.13 against the Gold Coast Titans. Penrith have won the past 5 against Gold Coast, and all things being equal, win this game once again. They've scored 40 points in their last meeting, which was round 25 last season on the Gold Coast. Prior to that, 18, then 48 points. The Panthers have pretty much been 3 converted tries or more favorites, and, very close to $1 in the odds over those past 3 meetings. So getting a little bit more this time around. There is still motivation for Penrith to be winning this game. If you look at the ladder here, they're on 38 points, but their points difference at 180. This means that if the Roosters and Sharks both win, then Penrith won't get a home final and they'll drop down to 4th. If obviously one of these sides win, then they'll at least drop down to 3rd due to that points differential. So Penrith have to be winning this game. I think they're going to win it and win it comfortably. Titans, since they won the game against the Broncos in round 22, I spoke about it back then. That was their grand final. Since then, have just completely dropped off. 44-0 against the Sharks, 32-16 against the Dragons, 48-22 against the Roosters, and then 36-14 last week against Newcastle. Penrith run up a score, win this game comfortably. Wouldn't surprise me to see them cover the spread. Titans looking for the end of the season. The home side has a really good record in this matchup, covering 7 of the past 9. And with the past 4 meetings all being played as Gold Coast Titans home games, it hasn't been since 2019 that Gold Coast have had to travel down to play Penrith in Penrith. So this is kind of foreign territory for them as well. That's a number of seasons since doing so. And yeah, wouldn't surprise me to see Penrith win this game by, that 30 points. They bounced back to form last week with a big win over the Rabbitohs, and I think it's a kind of similar situation here. Expect they'll probably be covering that spread, even though it is a big number. And it wouldn't surprise me to see their team total go over. I'd also be looking at the Titans team total to go under the number. The only thing is Penrith have given up 2 intercept tries in the past 2 weeks against Canberra and the Rabbitohs. And so, if they could stop doing that, that'll also help limit the opposition scoring. First game on Sunday, the Manly Seagulls against the Sharks. Manly 1.5 point favorites, around $1.80 to be winning this game. And first thing I'll say is I am surprised Manly is favored. The Sharks have a really good record against them. First of all, they've covered 5 of the past 6 against the Seagulls, and they've won 3 of the past 4. They haven't met this season. It was round 21 last year where Manly won 30 points to 26, but the Sharks were $1.35 for that game. So to have them all the way out to more than even money as underdogs for this game is very, very surprising. Manly come into this winning 3 of their past 4 games. They've also won 6 of their past 8, but did drop games against the Roosters and the West Tigers during that span. Sharks come into this game. Their 4-game losing streak ended last week, losing against the Warriors, but like that game, they're leading 22-4 at halftime, and then Warriors dominated possession in the second half. I think it was around 65-ish% possession. Sharks copped a sin bin, and also they lost the set restart and penalty count 8-1. I'm pretty sure was the final number for the second half. So all those factors considered, the Warriors were kind of entitled to overrun them. But probably, the Sharks should have won that game at the end of the day. That was a game that they should have put them away. I do think they bounced back here. They have a really good record against the Seagulls. Manly have 2 major outs for this game in Tom Trbojevic, which I've spoken about over the past few weeks, especially if you've been watching the try scorer video as well. Tom Trbojevic makes a major impact to the Seagulls' attack. Their, massive increase in scoring coincides with his performances. When you watch them play, the amount he does get involved in their attack is technically very impressive for a fullback. You don't see that as many fullbacks getting that involved in the game as he has a tendency to do. And they also without Jason Saab, who is their leading try scorer on the wing. So those 2 outs, one being fullback and the other being on the wing, but being a high try scorer on the wing, I think are definitely going to make an impact. And then the Sharks, pretty close back to full strength. They get Mulatalo back in the lineup. Nico Hines, this will be his second game back, so a bit out of fitness and getting back accustomed with the game. Trindle's been back for a few weeks now. I think the Sharks will be ready to put in a really good performance heading into finals, and they'll be disappointed with the way that they lost the game last week. So I'm more than happy taking Sharks as an underdog here on the money line. From a total at 49.5, I'll be leaning towards the over on this number, but I definitely prefer the side. 7 of the past 10 head-to-head have gone over at a number under 50. In Manly games this year, I'd always be happy taking overs. Just week after week, they're involved in high-scoring games. Both these sides, top 6 attacking sides. They're also both pretty good defensively, but in recent times have definitely been conceding a few more points. I think Sharks are the better defensive side. If we look at the overall ratings, Cronulla ranks 5th defensively, Manly ranks 6th in points conceded. One of the other key metrics I look at is meters conceded per play. Sharks rank 4th in that category, whereas the Seagulls rank 15th. This means that Cronulla should control field position in this game and get plenty of attacking chances. So that even strengthens my confidence in them winning this game. And then final game of the round will depend on what the top 8 looks like. It's between the Knights at home to the Redcliffe Dolphins. Newcastle, small favorites here. Earlier in the week, minus $1.5, $1.72. A little bit more money to come for them. They're minus 2.5 as it currently stands, and the total is 48.5. Both these sides come into this off big wins. Newcastle with a big win over the Gold Coast Titans, making it 3 of their past 4 in the only game they lost against the Sharks in golden points there. In pretty good form, and Dolphins, have been floundering. They lost 5 of their 6 games and then really hit form last week, running over the Brisbane Broncos. So kind of with that game, you have to decide whether you think the Dolphins put in a really good performance or the Broncos were just really, really bad. I'd be leaning towards the side there's an element of truth to both of those things. The Dolphins have covered 2 of the past 3 versus Knights. They've had the 3 matchups. Newcastle have won the past 2. 2 of the 3 meetings went over the total points line. Total here is 48.5. 44.5 was the previous total. In a regular game, I'd be leaning towards the over if this game was being played at any other time. But for this match, being with so much on the line, defense is going to have to play an important role. We've known all year long the Knights rely on the defense. They're one of the lowest scoring teams in the competition, but are pretty good defensively, whereas the Dolphins are a high scoring team, but only an average or slightly worse team defensively. If I had to pick a side for this game, even though it's being played down in Newcastle, I do give the Dolphins a big chance as an underdog here. They've won their only meeting down there, 36 points, 20 last season, round 3. They were 4.5-point favorites for that game. They're underdogs here, plus 1.5. If we get plus 2.5 or a little bit more money for the Knives out to plus 4.5, that'd be really ideal. But I think the Dolphins can get over the line here. They have the attack to win this game. I think Newcastle have been slightly favored by an easy schedule of recent times. Those 3 wins, when I said they've won 3 of their past 4, have been against Gold Coast, Rabbitohs, and the West Tigers. Now, if you look at the ladder, you have Gold Coast, Rabbitohs, and West Tigers, 3 of the bottom 4 teams on the ladder. They did push the Sharks, with the Sharks winning that game in Golden Point. I think that recent form's not quite as good as it potentially looks if you look at their win-loss margins. Dolphins, obviously they're not in the greatest form. 2 of their past 3 have been against Melbourne and Canterbury, though, which they lost both of those games. But I think, with Bennett coaching, I think he'll have a strategy for them to get over the Knights here. So Dolphins there to be winning the last game. I'll quickly recap all the selections. Broncos versus Storm. Like the Storm to win this game big and lean on it being a higher scoring game, and particularly from Melbourne. Tigers, Eels. We get a slightly better number on the plus for the Tigers. I'd be leaning towards that. Also, definitely keen on the over in that game. Rabbitohs, Roosters, probably a stay away game. Lean towards the under 53.5, particularly the Rabbitohs team total going under. Dragons, Raiders, like the Dragons to be winning the first half here, as clearly the better first half side of these 2 sides, but definitely respecting the recent form of the Raiders. Bulldogs versus Cowboys, like the Cowboys as underdogs on the road against the Bulldogs. Panthers versus Titans, expect Penrith to win this game and win it big. Seagulls versus Sharks, like the Sharks as an underdog against Manly, and like the Dolphins as an underdog against the Knights to close out the season. Really appreciate you guys following along and watching all season. I appreciate your support and following the channel. Hopefully, these videos each week have helped level up your betting over the year. I've definitely had some feedback that a lot of people have turned around their betting this season on the NRL and actually been looking at games from a different perspective as they were previously. So that was my goal with posting these videos. I'm going to keep on posting them right throughout the finals. Still have, this round and then 9 finals matches still to go. Still plenty of football coming up. Posting videos each week. And if you want to use the bet finders to study your bets, use it for analyzing the games and also the try scorers as we close in on the final few games of the season. I'll put the link in the description for you guys to access that. Check it out, see what's in there, and then prepare yourself for next year, because every season of the NRL is an opportunity to be making money. So really, really exciting times. Few big games coming up. Also starting up my American sports YouTube channel, which I'll put the link to that in the description as well. And that's where I'm going to be posting videos talking about the NFL games, which the NFL season starts this Friday. I'm going to be posting videos for those matches, going through similar things that I do in this video, the stats, the betting trends, the player props, all that similar kind of stuff for the NFL. So definitely check that out if you're interested, or you're just interested in learning more about it before taking the plunge and betting on it. It's definitely, if you're a fan of the NRL, along those very similar lines. And, I'll pass on like what I've learned over the years of betting on it as well. And also, I nearly forgot the try scorer video. I'm going to be recording that on Wednesday this week. I've already gone through and done a little bit of research just before recording this for the try scorers this week. We were profitable again last week. If you followed the staking strategy, it's kind of been the trend of the try scorers. The Thursday night, Friday, and Saturday games, we absolutely crush it. And then kind of when we're struggling to hit the Sunday games, other than 1 week where we hit all the try scorers on the Sunday, it's kind of been that pattern. So you definitely don't want to wait until the last minute to watch that video. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel, you have notifications on, so when that try scorer video gets posted, you get notified, you can watch it straight away and lock in those early bets, especially as we're predicting high scoring games in the Broncos Storm, high scoring in the Tigers Eels, especially as those first early games. And we have seen the Dragons Raiders game, those sides be in high scoring matchups of recent times as well. But with that being said, definitely keep an eye out for when those posted. Really appreciate you guys watching. Make sure you tune in for the finals, and I'll see you in the try scorer video coming up soon.